what we're going to be talking about in our strategies, and hoping to get some feedback from everybody in here. Let's hit that intro.
Let's go.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
Boom. I love that intro. I feel like you and I should probably get our own like little intro for this week, or kind of like our faces on some kind of animation or something like that. That'd be kind of cool. Let's see. Good morning, everybody. Let's see. Lisa, always quick on the trigger. Good morning,
Lisa.
We had a great morning. So this morning, Monday Mayhem, we're going to discuss, I picked a couple strategies. I'm going to spin the wheel. I've got a little wheel kind of thing going here, and then we'll kind of decide on what we're kind of going to be talking about. How's your weekend, Jeff?
Good. How about yours?
It was good. It was good. Like it was a good time to relax. I think we're winding down on summer now, so kind of getting out the Uggs and the flannel, and definitely getting all the Halloween gear and all that fun stuff. So let's see what we got.
Yeah, no flannel for me, but it was relaxing for sure.
When you get out the flannel, you let me know.
I will.
Beautiful. Okay, so today it's actually one of my favorite ones to talk about. It's going to be red zone strategies. Kind of shout out to the Buccaneers smashing the Dallas Cowboys last night. Great win for everybody, and seeing Tom Brady basically coming back again. So red zone strategies. Jeff, what do you kind of do when you've had all these discussions with your customers, and you're like, okay, we're getting there. You're basically 5 yards out from basically closing on them, and you got, let's say, 5 seconds left on the clock. What are you doing?
Well, I'll tell you, it is about strategy, Ryan, and setting up that 60-day. It's like a 60-day cycle that I basically have, where I want to try to identify and write everything down that has to be done within that cycle time. And there's a plethora of steps that you have to do to make sure that your sales is in sync, your operations is in sync. The same thing on your customer side. Are you collaborating the way that you need to be, and where you need to be, and also your carriers. Have a carrier meeting, make sure that they have a round table with your customers. So this way they can find out things that are happening at your customer, because you've already done, if you're right there before like closing your door, obviously you found some information out on their lanes. You most likely already got your carriers in place, your rates are in place. Now you have to step it up and find out the operational side from the inside out, rather than from the outside in, sort of speaking. And then collaborating where your customers can have that conversation with your carriers to understand their needs, their specific needs. Of course, you're part of that conversation as well. And then likewise, because it's very, very important when you have to ramp up to make sure that you're going to be engaging the way that you need on both sides, and that you're going to be hitting those goals and objectives.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, so like you mentioned, you got a 60-day plan, so it's not really a 5 yard. You're like, hey, I'm going to be planned out. And I would assume that obviously comes with experience, right? So obviously at the beginning of the stage in your career, it would look a little bit of like unorganized chaos. For me, when I'm kind of like in that red zone, we've sent over some proposals. We've had a bunch of calls. We've talked to the carriers. We've kind of got everything. Pricing is good. Contracts, all that fun stuff is taken care of. What I like to kind of do is kind of like roll out the red carpet kind of treatment, in terms of, hey, this is the kind of expectations, and find out. I like what you said about bringing your carriers kind of like on board with the roundtable as well, because your carriers are, and your ops and your customer service team, they're going to be the ones to really service your customer. Like, you could be talking sweet nothings to your customer ear all the time, but if there's no execution on it, then what's really, like, you're not going to end up anywhere. When you're having those roundtables with your carriers, Jeff, what things are you looking to iron out? Are you looking to iron out? You've already talked about availability. You've already talked about rates. But when do you start ironing out your expectations of them as a partner to you?
Yeah, and that's a great question. It is about the operational side. When you have these carrier roundtables, for sure you're not talking about rates, because you don't want everybody to know what kind of rates you got from everybody. It's more about the operational side and making sure, especially if it's a big customer, right? Because you're going to have a lot of moving pieces on a big customer. You're going to have to be scheduling the inbound, scheduling the outbound, making sure that those schedules meet certain criteria, especially on the carrier side and their availability. From my experience, it's not always what the shipper dictates, but it's also the carrier's availability and when they can get there at a specific time, and kind of build that around the carrier. And you'll be surprised that in most cases, the carriers are going to also abide by what the customer is requiring. And that really has to do, again, with the magnitude of the operation and how many truckloads that you're doing on a daily basis. And that also goes for the LTL as well. It could be parcel LTL. You could have a fleet moving in there as well as the truckload. So there's a lot of moving pieces. Not so complicated when you have like the one-offs and you may have like maybe 10 loads a month. Not all that difficult, but S&OP is very, very important on a ramp up and getting things prepared for launch. You want to make sure that you have a specific launch date in place and that it can be met on both sides, as well as you as a service provider, and that you've got the CSRs and you've got the operations in place to support your customer as well as the carrier.
Perfect. And I like what you said about the SOP, because I think SOP it's ironclad, right? Like you basically work that out with your own team, with the customer, and then with your incumbent, and you just have that there. And anytime, instead of like what I kind of like to see with SOPs is like, let's say we're customer service wants to know what's the pickup and delivery times at the receiver or the shipper. It's like, okay, well, let's go to the SOP rather than wasting an email or wasting a phone call, right? My mindset when we've kind of like approaching those red zone is that get all the information as possible. And like you always say, keep it simple, right? So you want to get all the information that you have, and that you don't really want to contact a customer for things that you can resolve on your own. That's one thing that's kind of like my personal thing. In terms of like your red zone, you're almost there at the final step. How do you kind of position when you're basically getting your SOP together? My strategy that I kind of personally use is that when I'm talking to customers, like, okay, we've agreed on everything. Let's do a trial of like 5 to 10 loads. Is that something that you've ever kind of done, or you kind of have any thoughts about that in terms of, hey, let's do a trial. Let's see how we're kind of working together, and then we'll basically take it forward after the 5 to 10 loads.
Sure. And I'm starting to smirk a little bit because my partner and I are in the midst of doing that right now. We have a very large company.
Look, we'll put it into your brain. I want to get into your brain right
now. We have a very large company that's shipping steel pipe out of Texas going into Canada. And it's a tremendous amount of loads every single week. But what we wanted to do to engage the customer correctly is to ramp it up. Like you said, let's start off small, and then let's start the engagement, get the right carriers in the corral that can support it, make sure that you have the bonds in place, because the carriers need to be bonded, unfortunately, when they're going across the border into Canada. And so it's making sure that you have the right carriers in place, that has the right certifications, the insurance, you name it, they must have it, and then ramp it up. And so as you're building that corral, now you can start taking on more and more of that workload until you get up to, it's like 5 lanes, 20, like 100 loads a month. So it's not something that you're just going to just turn on, because you're gonna fail miserably, because you're gonna have bumps in the road. Everybody has bumps in the road, right? Yeah. And then what you have to do is you have to start ironing it out and figuring out why these bumps exist, and then try to flatten it out a little bit, and then put work instructions in place or process improvement plans in place. There's numerous things that you can do to avoid these bumps from happening. But I also have, it's a 60-point customer facility profile checklist that I created a long time ago. And when I talk to my customers and everything, I give them this form and I tell them to fill out everything on that form, because it's going to has all the information that you need as a service provider that to enable you to support the carrier as well as the customer at a very high level. And it kind of takes away the guesswork. It's from hours of operation, the facilities. I mean, we're talking network here. It's a large form. So there's different things that we do operationally to ramp up to make sure that we have the right things in place to support both the carrier and the customer.
Perfect. And that's the one thing, like you're doing a 60-point check, like you're better off than like those oil change places, doing like a 5 check on your car, like just tapping it and saying, hey, your car's good to go. But with that being said, like what I like to do and kind of strategy I like to kind of tell people, if you're not doing this, definitely start doing this. On your calls with your customers and even with your carriers, bring your ops and your customer service team on.
Oh, definitely.
And that's what I kind of like to do. I kind of bring these guys and girls on the team so that they know more than I do in terms of, hey, what the receiver, what the shipper is going to be like, and what the expectations. Maybe it's been other loads that they've done there before. So involve them, empower them. And I think that's the one thing we kind of need to do is that empowering our own team so that they can really take us into the end zone, right? Since we kind of got the football theme going on here. So we got the red zone. We don't hit the touchdown. We fumble it. So in terms, can you name like a situation where like, hey, you thought everything was good to go. Let's say either they ghosted you or the project got taken off or something like that. Something went wrong, not to your expectations. What did you do, Jeff, in terms of basically bringing this back? Or, hey, sometimes you got to chalk it up as an L and then kind of move on.
Yeah. First of all, I've learned not to panic. That's the first thing, obviously there's a reason why it went left and you wanted to go right. And you have to really dig into it to find out. But it's not a time for panic. It's a time for uncovering the issues and then putting the right procedures and processes in place in order to turn it around and get it back on track. A lot of times, things do go awry and they're not going to come back for some reason or another. And it's happened to me in the past where you've done a tremendous amount of work. You've got all the pieces of the puzzle there. And then the customer second guess and says, you know what, we're not going to do it. It's okay. I mean, the way I look at it is it's practice for me. It's like I like to do my skills and make sure they're in check. I've been doing it for a long time. So I like the Excels. I like doing data. I like doing all of that. And when you go through these procedures and getting ready for this, possible launch and it doesn't, it's just fine tuning your skills again. So I don't find it as being a burden or a lost cause. It's another learning procedure. So don't panic when those things happen, but try to uncover, talk to the key people, both on the carrier side, if it's carrier related, or on the customer side, or both. And we were talking about sales and ops. I'm not talking about your sales and ops. I'm talking about the customer sales and operations, that when you bring in your carriers to have a roundtable, make sure your customer brings in their sales and operations team, because this way everybody's going to be on the same page and they'll have a very good understanding of what's going to happen in the near future, new products that are coming on board, a new rollout, whatever it might be. This way, there's no surprises on the carrier side as well as the service provider side, and everybody is on the same page, traveling at the same speed. And so when it's time to launch, you're ready to go and you have all the moving pieces in place at that time.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's that. And sorry, I should have mentioned that as well. Like, yeah, definitely have that conversation with their whole team too, because sometimes you'll probably see it as well that the customer that you're talking to is not the person you're going to be talking to day to day, obviously, right? So like the load planners or like the people, those are the ones that your team is going to be communicating with the most. Everybody here watching on, thank you guys so much for watching. Just please leave some comments saying, hey, what do you guys kind of do when you're kind of at that red zone strategy? Some things to kind of push it forward. We'd like to obviously learn from ourselves as well. For me, when I kind of like look at it too, when it comes to, let's say somebody goes ghost or something like that, I like what you said with don't panic, because I think that's the first. It's just human nature, right? What I kind of like to do is I kind of like to go to somebody who's kind of been there before, like let's say somebody, another sales rep in the team, or it's like my manager, director, or someone like that, someone who's been there through the trenches, and just kind of ask, hey, what have you kind of done in this situation? I know Dan has been a resource to me where like I'd be like XYZ has happened. What would you kind of do? So you kind of like lean that experience. And I think like when we're having those prospecting calls as well, we like to have those stories, right? We like to kind of build with our customers. Hey, I was in this situation and this is what I did to overcame it, right? From coming there. When with your customers, and I think like you mentioned, don't panic.
No, but the thing is too, is that to go back to the customer, in a lot of scenarios, if you're really good, you're going to be talking to the C-level people, right?
Yeah.
So the C-level people are up here and you have a good relationship, but now they don't really know what's happening on the ground floor. So that's why I'm saying, you start bringing in those moving pieces. Of course, he or she can be present on the C-level side of it, but now you want to bring in your strategic operations and your freight bill payment and your ops team and the warehouse management team, all of that, because they're so key in making sure that what you're doing is going to roll out right. If you happen to not bring in one of those key players, you're going to lose out greatly, because they know something that you don't know, that they don't know either. And now it's all new, it's fresh, and everybody's got it on its mind. And so now you're traveling again at the same speed. But please always bring in those key players, or at least make it an attempt to talk to them, because it is key in building that long-term business relationship. You're not going to survive without having them part of it, for sure.
Of course, and it's long term too, right? You want to make sure that you're not, even though we're doing the trials and things like that, you want to kind of make sure that your mindset with your customer, and even with the people at the ground floor too, is like, hey, we're gonna be working together for a long time. So let's get together, let's get to understand each other, and let's kind of work out those kinks.
Right. Well, that's the plan anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It never goes away. But just actually, you kind of segue into the next thing I was actually going to mention. So you've hit that touchdown. You got to hit that extra point now. You've already locked in the customer. You've done a couple loads. What are you personally doing, and what are you looking at yourself when you're seeing like these things are getting done by your team and their team as well?
Well, I'm looking at the data for sure, and I'm seeing, like you said earlier, if you're ramping up slowly, you're trying to see the volume, you're trying to see the revenue. Is it profitable? You're in contact with the carrier. You're making sure that you've got on-time delivery performance as well as on-time pickup performance. It's not all about delivery; it's also about the pickup times. Because if you're delaying, if you've got a delay on the pickup side, just imagine what it's happening internally for the warehouse operations when they're staging all that, getting ready, because they know that you're coming in at a specific time as it's agreed upon, and now their whole dock is packed up with all this goods, and you don't show up. Well, then that blocks all the other time, and it's downtime. It costs them a lot of money. So you're trying to investigate this. You're definitely having a lot of phone calls with your customer. How are we doing? Where are we failing? Don't be afraid to ask, where am I failing? Because it's new to them. It's new to us. And you want to try to uncover those, what I call hidden bank opportunities. It's something that you may not have discussed, that just happens, evolves or comes out of the woodwork, and then it's known. So now you have to react to that problem or that issue and try to fix it as quickly as possible. But don't be an absent service provider, meaning that you're just taking it for granted that everything's going well and the pieces are moving by themselves. It's not going to happen. We work in the logistics industry, and every day is a challenge. You don't know when you're going to get blindsided, and anything could come up. So always look at the what if scenarios. Always look at the worst case, because if you do that, you're going to be prepared for what comes down the pike. Especially if you've got that experience, you can kind of fend them off before it happens. But if you're new to the business, always keep it in the back of your head and think about what could happen. And just don't call up the customer and have that conversation. Also be engaged with your carriers. What are you seeing on the carrier side? What's not working at the shipper? because it goes both ways. Shipper may say it's great. The carrier may say it sucks. So you got to find out, why does it suck and why is it great on the shipper side, and try to mend that problem as quickly as possible, because carriers, they're in the business to make money and be profitable, just like the shipper, just like us as service providers. So when they're sitting there for long periods of time, they're losing money, and they don't like to do that. And they'll be more than happy to pull away if it's consistent and they see a lot of problems that's not getting resolved. So.
And I like what you said about like not being reactive, because like sometimes our industry kind of is a reactive industry sometimes, but I think like the kind of like, not necessarily true professionals, but like the experienced people, they kind of know that, hey, be proactive in it. Right. So you always have to kind of make sure that you're keeping an eye on the ball, keeping a hand on the ball and looking at everything. That's what I was mentioning, like the whole like red carpet, like I want to basically treat it like kind of like the Oscars, right? Like I want everything to kind of necessarily go right. And even when it goes wrong, like something goes wrong, you got to stay in front of it and kind of own up to it, because a situation might be like, let's say the carriers, they didn't pick up on time, or you didn't use the carrier bails out there. Something kind of happens on the carrier side. You've got to be there to kind of figure that out, because how many times have you seen personally, Jeff? Because I've seen this a lot where, hey, we've got a load, carrier dropped on it, and then, okay, well, team basically spends the whole day trying to recover it, can't recover it, and then it's like they roll it to the next day without telling anybody, and it's like, well,
no, you can't do that.
You can't do that. Right?
You can't do that. And again, when you're doing large bids, right, on the RFP side of it, and the smaller shippers have a lot to do with it, because there's a lot of brokers out there that have a lot of small shippers. And then there's a lot of brokers out there that have very big companies that they do with a lot of volume. So when you're doing the RFP and you're getting your best price, your secondary, tertiary carriers that are in place. So in case that the first carrier, for some reason, turbocharger breaks down, they're stuck on the road, they can't pick up. Well, now you have a secondary. So it's very, very important to put each lane, when you're building that out, best rates for each lane that's out there. You have your primary carrier and secondary carrier, and always be in contact with that secondary carrier just in case that type of problem comes up, Ryan, because you want to be engaged. Don't, just because they bid on the lane or lanes doesn't mean that you don't have to talk to them anymore. And you're just, okay, thank you. And then when problems come up, you go back out to them. They're going to tell you to go to hell, basically. It's you don't engage with me, you don't talk with me. So it's very, very important to do that in order to cut down on the time, because you are right. If some carrier falls off that lane and you're hustling because you don't have the backup plan in place, what does that make you look as a service provider to your customer when you're like, sorry, I can't pick it up. Can I pick it up tomorrow? You don't even want to ask that question. You've got to have those operations in place. You have to have a game plan put in place as well to make sure that you can recover quickly. You don't.
That's why the customer brings you on as the expert, right? Like they didn't like. Let's call it spade a spade. Anybody could book a load on a load board, right? So they bring you on as a service provider. You've sold yourself up into this point to get to this level and basically take it to the next point from there. So I like exactly what you're
more than just moving freight. I mean, what I tell a lot of people out there and people that I've mentored, don't always concentrate on the freight. The freight is probably the least important thing. Yeah, I know you want to make a lot of money, and the only way you make money is moving product, but you really need to investigate and find out about the internal operations of all your customers, and also do the same thing on your carrier side. The more knowledge that you have, the better prepared that you will be in case these problems come up. So like I said the last time, if you have the ability, you have a friend that works in a warehouse at DC, see if you can go in there for the day and walk around, just walk around and, look at what's happening and what they go through on a daily basis. Go into the yard, watch how these trucks are being moved in, the workhorse, how they're moving in those trailers, shuffling them around, how they're staging things on the dock. Go into the freight office, walk around, ask questions. It's one of the best things that you can do to gain really critical education. There's so much more to logistics than just moving freight. You gotta learn to ask those pertinent questions when you're engaging a prospect. And the more you know, the better off you're going to be, and the more revenue and the more customers you're going to get.
And I think too, like one thing for me, so just a little knowledge here. Like my background, I actually took accounting in college, and that was actually my major. I wanted to be an accountant, and then I figured that's not what I wanted to do. So I always kind of have a soft spot for working with accounting teams, and when I'm working with like logistics as well. And like you said with your roundtable, something I personally like to do is talk to their accounting team as well. Find out, because they could be like the shipping manager or anything like that, they could be bringing price, and yes, we're saving X amount of money, but the time that it takes like the accounting person to actually bill out or do the receivables or even wait for things like PODs and all that stuff, it's time is money, right? So I think it's important just not talking with like the shipping and logistics team, is finding out from everybody, I don't talk to sales guys. Have you ever talked to sales guys from another company? I love talking to sales guys, because as sales guys, we always love to talk, right? So
I love talking to sales guys, because I'm not a salesperson. Like I said, I have 35 years on the operational side. I have no business in sales. And the only reason why I became a salesperson is that I hate brokers. I mean, I really do. And the reason I say that, Ryan, is that when you're on the operations side for as many years as I've been, and then you get calls from brokers that have absolutely no clue what they're doing or what they're saying, and you get 30 of them a day because you're managing like close to $100 million worth of freight, let me tell you something. I know what those guys in those seats are getting slammed with every single day. I'm not against the freight brokerage industry at all. I'll just be very clear about that, because there's some spectacular and very highly educated brokers out there, and those are the good ones. It's the uneducated, the ones that really don't know what they're doing. They're very unethical. Those are the guys that I dislike very, very much, and it gives the industry a really bad name. And I'm not afraid to go and say that kind of stuff, because I have a lot of friends out there who are in the freight brokerage area that really know what they're doing. They know who they are. And I will bet you $1 billion that they would definitely back me up on this. It's just, there's just so many unethical people out there. It just gives everybody out there, and sure, we have competitors and everything, but it's not fair for the good guys. It really isn't.
Yeah, and I think with our industry, especially with like the pandemic, everything like that, people kind of saw that social media creep of like what you can do as a trucker or what you can do as a broker, right? So I'm a big believer in education before compensation. If you're going to be really good at what you do, you got to like really understand the industry, do the resources, do the work. Other than people think that by doing the work is the phone calls and the emails. That's not even like half of it, to be completely honest. It's about knowing exactly what you're looking at for in terms of your ICP with your customer, or basically finding out what's going on. I like what you said, keep saying about like going through a DC and finding out exactly what they did, because what we don't understand from our side, and we got to put ourselves in their shoes, is that, hey, if we got a 5-minute or even a 10-minute delay, like it's brutal. Sorry, Jeff.
No, I'm saying exactly, Ryan. And if you can, hop along and go for a ride with a carrier. I'm serious about this. If you can do it, and you have a friend who is a driver, do it. I mean, there's so many different types of delivery methods, whether it's on the reefer side or LTL side or truckload side or intermodal side. I mean, you name it. If you could just spend one day in the shoes of any one of those modes and just understand the complexity and what they go through, just to get just a small little amount of education from doing that, because you're not going to gain it all in one day, that's for sure. But at least you'd have a better perspective of what they go through day in and day out. But I would strongly advise that for sure.
Perfect. Okay, so looks like we're coming up on time here. Before we kind of like get go, I just actually want to make mention that this week is actually National Truck Driver Association Week. So I want to thank everyone that we kind of got here. Jeff, you kind of left me there.
I don't know what happened.
It's all good, man. It was like kind of fun a little bit, but we just want to thank everybody for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe. We're all on all the social channels at Sales Chatter. Tomorrow's gonna be a great one. Jeff and I are gonna have an amazing guest tomorrow. Tune in to kind of see what that. Any kind of follow-up thoughts? Sorry, any final thoughts here, Jeff, before we let everybody go?
No, just I thought it was a good show today for sure. You know, there's so many different areas that people have to educate themselves in, and that you know, this industry is really, really tough. And the more that you know, the better off you're going to be for sure.
Well, I think maybe you and I basically will do a video this week, education before compensation, what we actually do. You know, what, like, let's say we're going after a customer, like exactly what we do, and kind of like figure out what everyone's doing, right? And I think that's going to be the big thing to separate it. It's, I believe, like as we're talking about on Friday, this is the end of the year. This is going into the new year next year. It's separation season. You know, it's time to put in that work and basically separate yourself from those people who are not doing the work, right? So
right, and you know something, that might be a really, really good idea, because this is the best time of year to start getting involved with customers, because they're starting to build their budgets and forecasts for next year, and it's a great time for you to get your foot through the door, even though we're getting into peak season, but peak season really has started already. Start engaging them. You know, you don't have to make, at least for me, you don't have to make 100 calls a day, whatever. Pick your poison, pick your niche, understand who you're going to reach out to in the company that you want to engage in, and do a lot of background checks. Get as much knowledge as you possibly can. Put those bullets in your gun and fire away, man, and you'll do really, really well for sure.
All right, no better moment than to finish off on that. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Have a good one.
In trucking, our motto is people before profit. Today's market requires more transparency, consistency, and focus on what our clients need to win. Centurion Trucking and American Logistics are poised to help their clients achieve and surpass their targets. If you're looking for a team that honors your needs, dreams, and aspirations, then get a hold of Daman at American Logistics or Centurion Trucking and start designing your career today.